Okay, hello everyone. Let's start a webinar on building Toastmasters corporate programs. Welcome to the webinar of District 108. My name is Elena Paventa and I'm Club Growth Director. And today's webinar meeting will be run by our region advisor, Elizabeth Nostedt. And we'll be having a guest, Paul Jensen, past district director of District 74. And we will learn today, we will hear about step-by-step approach, how to build a club at the company, how to prepare for a corporate visit, how to talk about Toastmasters educational program. The meeting will be recorded and it will be put on our YouTube channel, on our district YouTube channel. If you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the chat box. And we have Aaron, our question master, who will take care of them. And during question and answer session, all the questions will be asked. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Nostedt.
Thank you so much, Elena, and I thank you for the invitation to do this webinar with everybody who's on the call today. We built a lot into this, and I thank my helpful friend Paul for being a person we could bounce ideas off of, because we're both very interested in the corporate program. So I'm going to speak for a few minutes, and then Paul will come in and do one special section, and then I will speak some more. So if we look at my agenda, which I thought I was changing screens, there I am. We have a busy agenda. In section number 1, we're going to look at the what and the why. What is a corporate club or program? Why would you like to build one? In section 2, we'll look at finding the companies. How do you find the companies that should start a club? And how do you do some cold calls? In section 3, we'll look at preparation. There is a paradigm shift for corporate clubs. How do we get to know what it is? How to prepare yourself, how to prepare and meet a corporate champion of a club. And then in section 4, we'll look at some next steps, laying the foundation and the demonstration meeting. So section number 1 is what and why. And there's a bit of confusion about what a corporate club or program really is. And the reason I'm using corporate program here is, I'm going to get to that a bit later on when we talk about the paradigm shift in language. It came in Pat Johnson's book, and Pat is a past international president of Toastmasters, and she released a book at the International Convention in August. And she suggests that we should not be calling them corporate clubs, but we should be calling them corporate programs, which is why I put it here. So, but then there's still some confusion about what it really is. And I throw the questions out because there's no really one direct answer. But is it a club or a program that only allows the employees of a certain company? So that would make it a closed club or program. Or is it where a Toastmaster member or even a non-member decides that they should start a club that meets on the company premises? Is that the criteria, just that it meets on the company premises? Or is it where the company pays the membership fees? Or is it where the Toastmasters educational program is part of the corporate educational offering? And then we could look at, well, do we also include government or university clubs? And I'm not providing an answer on any of these, but it's more to raise the level of awareness, what we're really calling or defining a corporate club or program. And then what I wanted to add in, well, why would you want to build one? And I put just a couple possible things here. Do you work for a large, and by large we mean 200 plus employees, a large company, and you want to start a program at your site? Do you perhaps want your company to pay your Toastmaster membership fees? Or do you perhaps want the learning experience of starting a club or program so that you can reach a leadership award? those are all some great reasons why you might want to start it. So if we continue into section 2, now this is the section that Paul is going to cover. And some of you may know Paul Ashley Jensen. He's the past district governor of District 74, which is South Africa. And he has started clubs and corporate clubs on 3 continents. In South Africa, on maybe not continents, Mauritius, and even in Australia where he's living now. So over to you, Paul, so you can proceed with this section.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning to everyone from Brisbane, Australia, District 69. We're going to talk about how you first engage with a corporate in order to help them start a Toastmasters Club. Just as with our Toastmasters presentations, your focus is on what's in it for them. And we're going to talk through on the next slide the preparation that's required, the essential ingredients you're looking for in this particular cold call you're going to make, who you should speak to, how you make the call, and the outcome that you're looking for. Engaging with corporates in this manner is a great opportunity for you to learn sales skills, marketing skills, how to work with teams, how to engage with corporates. This has been one of the greatest sources of learning for me in my Toastmasters journey. When we talk about first impressions, that's essentially what we're focused on with this cold call. So we know about first impressions. You only have one chance to make them. And when you're planning for your cold call with the decision maker in the corporate, that's what you're focused on. What's the first impression that you create of yourself and of Toastmasters? One of the things to think about here is when you're engaging with this corporate decision maker, the values of Toastmasters can help you guide your engagement with them. Integrity, service, respect, and excellence, because all of these together are part of the elements of what makes your engagement professional with this corporate. In terms of the essential ingredients you're looking for, the outcome, you're looking to be able to book a meeting with the decision maker so they'll discuss the opportunity with you further. You're looking to address why they should be talking to you, what's in it for them, and the start of that discussion is what pain points they have as an organization regarding leadership development. So let's talk about who you would call. And there are a number of sources of corporate leads. You can look at corporations that have Toastmasters clubs elsewhere in the world. So when you're considering developing a Toastmasters program in Warsaw in Poland, for example, there's a list of corporates that exist there. Some of those match up with organizations worldwide that have Toastmasters clubs. Some examples, Ernst & Young, BDO, some of these international brands where we were already successfully engaging with them elsewhere in the world. You're also looking for organizations that have 200 or more employees. That seems to be the sweet spot, the minimum that's required in order for a corporate to have a Toastmasters club. Sometimes you will have corporates who approach you directly, and the way that that usually works is through the toastmasters.org website, and those inquiries come through to your club growth director, who receives them in a system called Insightly, and they can then be followed up on. We have, for example, some we're working on here in District 69, where we received an inquiry from Virgin Air, which you're familiar with. And so that process is now rolling out here in District 69 for that particular opportunity. When you're considering the corporation that you're going to approach, you want to be looking at who the decision maker is in the corporation so that you're making sure that your engagement with them is effective. LinkedIn is often a very good way of assessing who you're speaking to, so where the inquiries come from. So again, with this example I mentioned earlier about Virgin Air, we've gone along and looked on LinkedIn to find out the profile of the individual who's made the inquiry and to understand if they are a decision maker in the organization. And if they're not, you can use LinkedIn again to find who might be for that particular corporation in this particular location. Then let's talk about how you would...
I could just add a little point in there too. Of course, the company's website also has a really good, usually has a profile of their employee, of the leaders in the company as well.
Yes, that's also a great source of info. Now let's talk about who you would call and how you now make that particular engagement. So most initial engagements with organizations happen via email still. So again, an example of Virgin, you now know who you want to speak to. Perhaps they've made the inquiry. You can send them an email introducing yourself. Hi, my name is Paul Jensen. I'm part of the team in Brisbane, Australia, helping new members join Toastmasters and help organizations creating clubs. And I would like to talk to you further. Your objective here is to agree a date and a time to be able to make the call with them, and the method of making the call. Sometimes we overlook differences in time zones, how people like to be engaged. Would you prefer I call you on your mobile, your office number? Do you want to engage via Skype? All of those are important when you're setting up that call. They are part of the ingredients of making sure it's professional. Nothing more embarrassing than missing a time zone, wrong day, calling them on their mobile and they expect you to connect on Skype. Your objective here is for the call to be short, probably less than 50 minutes, so that you get to the point. It demonstrates, again, great Toastmaster skills, plus it demonstrates respect for their time. Often the decision makers are very busy in corporate environments, and they will have a great first impression of you if you can demonstrate that understanding of time, their time particularly. So the outcome that you're looking for from the call that you make is to understand what their pain point is. In other words, there are many reasons why a corporate might be interested in starting a Toastmasters Club. Perhaps they want to improve their employee engagement. Perhaps they have a directive and instruction to develop more leadership talent internally. There are many reasons. And your discussion with them, part of it is finding out what the reason is, why they're making an inquiry, or if you're making the cold call yourself directly to them, what particular pain points they have in terms of leadership development internally. Your next step is that you want to have a face-to-face meeting with them, with the decision makers. That's a key. So you want to make sure that the person you're speaking to has the authority to be able to start a Toastmasters Club internally, be able to engage with other decision makers in the organization, and the budget authorization that's required. Further along the line, you want to get to the point where you're deciding on a launch date. In other words, the first meeting of the club in which they would invite interested employees in the right circumstances, with the right agenda, with the right focus, so that you improve the chance of success of the club. The main point to focus on here, and I'm going to conclude on this, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions you have, is to understand what their pain point is. Because if you understand that and you communicate clearly that you can address that and it can be solved by a Toastmasters Club, then they'll want to speak to you. I'm going to hand back to Aaron now to see if there are any questions.
Currently, there isn't any questions yet.
Okay, perhaps there might be some later on. Then I'll hand back to Elizabeth.
Thanks very much, Paul. I think this cold calling is a really great area, and I think very few of us have actually had to do that unless we're in a real sales situation. But if we would really like to expand our corporates in our area, then I think it's something we should look into. We were having a call with the region advisors just yesterday, and this came up as, you know, our districts doing this, and not so many are doing it. So I think we're missing an opportunity. But let me proceed on with the section 3 of the agenda here, and that is preparation. And I'm looking at preparation so that you know the new language for corporates, so that you can prepare yourself and have thought through what the qualities and benefits of Toastmasters are, and how you would prepare to meet the corporate champion. And I called it meeting 1 and meeting 2. So this is a great page to think of the paradigm shift of, instead of using the language when we talk about clubs, then let's look at the language of the corporation. So our common terms are on the left side, those we're familiar with, but the new language we should be using when dealing with corporates, that's what's on the right side. So instead of calling it a club, we could call it a Toastmasters corporate program. That's what I mentioned earlier, program. Instead of calling it a member, we could call it a participant. instead of talking about the dues that you have to pay, membership fees, you could talk about tuition, like at university. Instead of club meetings, you might call it a program or a session. Instead of club officers, I've got a couple there, it would be leadership roles or a program executive board. Instead of club officer training, we talk about leadership training or executive board training. And these ideas sound a lot more attractive to a corporation than just a club, because a club to them might often mean something else in the company, like the people who belong to the photography club or the people who go in the hiking club, which are often much more social organizations. And while Toastmasters may include some social situations, we like to consider ourselves for personal development and growth that's going to benefit the work we do. I'll continue with a few more there. Instead of manuals or paths, we might talk about the curriculum. Instead of the various things like CC or DTM, now we'd also, of course, want to refer to pathways, but why not call them milestones in somebody's development? Instead of the Distinguished Club Program, Paul and I were talking about how there was some difference in the words that were used between different cultures. So in one culture, it might be called a balanced scorecard, but for instance, here in Europe, we're always using key performance indicators, or at least specifically in Sweden. And of course, it might be called a strategic plan as well. And then instead of goals for the club, call it critical success factors. So these points were brought out in Pat Johnson's book. And I think it's something that we really have to get this into our head to use different terminology. And we're going to share these slides afterwards, or perhaps some of you have already acquired Pat Johnson's book, because there's more things you might want to add in from her book. I cover some of them in the rest of the program. The next set of preparation that I thought of is that you should know, if you're going to be selling this in or promoting it in a corporation, you should know what the unique qualities of the Toastmaster educational program are. And so some of the new terminology that we're also using is it's an experiential learning environment. Now, in the past, we've often used the expression learn by doing. And I think that's still okay to use it, but you know, the hot buzzword seems to be experiential. It's self-paced. And for a company, this might be important because they might have it in their mind that it's like a course you attend where it's a 3-day course and then you're done. But in this case here, because it's self-paced, people don't always proceed at the same speed as the next person, so they might remain in the program longer. There's also no graduation. There's just various levels of development and learning, and it's continuous learning. So people stay because there's so much to learn. There's also no pass or fail in the program. It's continuous. And people are learning from peer evaluations. I think it's important to point out that it's not instructor-led or graded. Companies are far more used to having somebody come in and do a program, or they send their employees out to attend a course. But what we're saying here is there's no instructor. We're focusing both on communication and on leadership development. And that's probably one of the really unique things about Toastmasters, because quite often other organizations focus on one or the other. I think one of the biggest unique qualities is that it's a worldwide program and it's in 140 countries. So it's tried and tested and it works in all the countries. And maybe I should also add in here of all the different languages that are now available. So that's also a great bonus. Some of the things that you might not be aware of, and I probably didn't think about it before, but although we're trying to sell this into corporation, the curriculum that we have is the property of Toastmasters International. It's intellectual property and it is copyrighted. So we shouldn't just be giving it away, or yeah, let's leave it at that. As well, the company needs to agree to the conditions of collaboration. And I have a little bit more on this collaboration idea or the conditions for it in a later slide. And on this slide here is the benefits for the corporation. I'm sure we've all thought of some of them, but it's maybe a little bit more of a unique twist about what is the benefit. So I'm going to go along and just make a few comments about each one here on the slide. Critical listening skills. So just imagine in a company if our leaders were actually listening to their employees or their teams. And the feedback and evaluation skills. You're both giving feedback, but also being able to receive feedback. There still are people out there who have a hard time when they get feedback. And there's so many occasions in a work situation where you need to give feedback about job performance or how projects are going. So you learn the skills here. The interpersonal skills or interpersonal communication skills, those are things like small talk before or after a meeting, or in a work situation, like connecting at a business gathering and being able to chat with another person and say something interesting or logical. Time limits. I think in all companies, wherever you work, it's a real hassle to keep on the time. But this is something we like to do, is keep the meetings running on time. On the second line, leadership training is a big thing. And here comes that word experiential again. You're learning by doing. And some of the examples are like learning how to lead a meeting. Surprisingly, not everybody knows how to do that. How about how to run a conference or how to give feedback that motivates somebody? Those are all leadership traits. Develop confidence. I think you have all experienced it if you've given at least 3 speeches in a Toastmaster program. I think you've experienced how your confidence has developed. And if you've gone farther, it's even more developed. Presentation skills should be pretty obvious here, but it's such a big area where anybody can develop. And doing different kinds of presentations, like informative presentations, persuasive or inspirational. Setting and managing personal goals. And this is something at least I seem to see in the press nowadays, is if you can't manage yourself, how can you manage other people? So here you're deciding what level you want to achieve during a 6 or 12-month period, and then measuring yourself if you've met it. Critical thinking skills. And maybe until Pathways came out, a lot of people didn't think about what actually is critical thinking. But I see this when you're giving an evaluation, you need to think critically. What is it that I can say that I will motivate this speaker and motivate them that they want to continue? That's one aspect of critical thinking. Interviewing skills is also really relevant in a job situation. And this, of course, you learn the technique in table topics when you're presenting the questions in table topics, or when you're receiving the question and have to give an answer. It's like preparing for an interview. Managing meetings. Well, meetings are also experiential. When you're the Toastmaster for the meeting, you have to learn how to plan the meeting, and you have to introduce people, and you have to keep the meeting on time. And I think that's a skill that most companies would just love to have. Organizational skills. Well, this is, as I pictured it, it is how to lead members to reach goals, how to manage budgets, or how to lead others. Strategic planning at the bottom. It's also experiential. If you are a member of the leadership team at the club level, area level, district level, then you're setting the strategy for the group for a year or for a longer period. And that should also be very valuable in a work situation. And of course, accountability. The example I thought of is showing up when you say you will and take the role that's maybe assigned to you or that you volunteered for, showing up. So those are just some of the benefits that I picked up on, and I'm sure there's a few more. And probably if we sat for 5 minutes of brainstorming, we'd come up with even more. as I see it, we should have these benefits at our fingertips if we're going in to talk to a corporation. So yes, please feel free to borrow my slide if you're going in to talk to a company, or come up with your own fancier slide where you have icons or something that would mean the same thing. As I see it, there's an additional step to preparation, and this is after you've done the cold call and you're going to have the meeting, the cold call that Paul talked about, and now you're actually going to go in and meet the corporate champion. It could be called the corporate sponsor as well. As Paul mentioned, you're having a meeting time of first time of maybe only 15 to 20 minutes. And here it's suggested that you, if you do not have corporate experience with Toastmasters, take along somebody else that has corporate experience and would be familiar with using the corporate language that we talked about. Be comfortable with sharing the benefits of Toastmasters, and be comfortable with explaining the unique qualities of the Toastmaster program. And in this first meeting, prepare the date for the demonstration meeting or information meeting. We're kind of using that term equally, demonstration or information meeting. And then be sure to ask this corporate champion or sponsor to attend the meeting, and he or she should also promote it. As I see it, there should be a second meeting. And then here's where you're discussing more the conditions for collaboration. I mentioned that earlier because we're often not thinking of this as a business proposition. And I think we should be. There should be agreement or conditions attached to it when we're setting up a corporate club. So one of the conditions is that there should be prepared speeches made at every program session. There should be oral and written evaluations done at each time for those prepared speeches. And also for corporates, something that we don't often stipulate well enough is that anybody who's in the leadership role of the corporate club must attend the training for the corporate officers. It's mandatory. And as well, this is a way to point out that there's more leadership challenges in a leadership role than people might not be aware of it right away. There also is a requirement for a minimum of 20 participants. And ideally, it should be 25 to 45, 40 people that are attending and active in the club. Toastmasters actually says that if you don't meet these minimum requirements, it can actually withdraw the program. Now, I'm stating it fairly strongly here for those of you who are in this meeting, but we'd have to decide if that is something you'd state as strongly as, hey, we might remove it from you. And then the company should agree to these conditions of collaboration. In some parts of the world, there is actually an agreement, a written agreement. Paul told me about a memorandum of agreement in clubs in Australia. And perhaps that's something that we should be adding in when we're selling in or talking about the corporate program. For the company needs to also live up to their part of the bargain in the corporation. Now, I'm going to take a minute and ask our question master, Aaron, if any other questions have come in before I proceed to the next section.
There are two questions. One is directed to Paul and one is directed to you. So I'll ask the question directed to Paul first. So there have been some inquiries to understand how the cold call approach works. So a live demonstration is appreciated. Can you demonstrate to us how would you approach any of the companies in acquiring their first agreement?
Thanks, Aaron. As Mark Snow pointed out, there's actually a cold call script on the Toastmasters International website. It gives you a good overview of how to approach the cold call. I think the essential point to make is that when you're speaking to someone for the first time, you have to establish credibility. Why should they listen to you? And part of establishing that is demonstrating some understanding of them and their circumstances. A very quick and easy demonstration of this is, let's imagine I was calling Elizabeth and I wanted to sell a Toastmasters program in her organization. And so I might Google her and look on LinkedIn and find out what kind of activities she's busy with from a business point of view. And I would find out that she's involved in project management within her organization. And so when I call her up and introduce myself and then start the call by asking her some questions about her experience and some of her challenges in her organization, that already establishes credibility. Because now I'm interested in her and I've done some research. The second part, briefly, is I was thinking of Barclays as an example when we were talking about cold calling. If you look on the Barclays International website, you'll find all kinds of useful information that'll help you make that connection with them. They have all sorts of information about their leadership development programs you could ask about the community development programs where they're trying to engage externally with communities to develop leadership within the environments they operate in. And finally, interestingly about Barclays is many of their values align with ours from a Toastmasters point of view. They also have listed as their values integrity, service, respect, and excellence. Perhaps we could answer that in more detail at a later point, and I'm happy to do a more detailed live demonstration. Aaron?
Thank you very much, Paul. The second question is directed to Elizabeth. So you have mentioned about the minimum requirements to failure to meet it will result the curriculum being withdrawn. Is there any other possibilities of having a meeting that has around like 10 to 15 members that's still not meeting the minimum requirement, and how would you approach it?
It's a great question, because I think what we've seen in corporate clubs or regular community clubs, that clubs are meeting when they have lower numbers, but it's going to be getting the ultimate value out of the club when you have more members. It adds more energy to the meeting. It adds more perspectives from different people when they give evaluations. So I think if we set the baseline that it's a minimum require of 20, then I think we're setting it correctly. And we should probably be going in every time we start a community club as well and saying, you've got to have 20 members show up at meetings. So let's get more available on the roster so that the meetings are better. I think that's how I'd answer it for now.
Okay, and we have the third question for you, which is currently the last question. The third question will be related to whether you'll be inviting Toastmasters, because there will be 2 demo meetings according to the slides you mentioned. So would it be better to invite the Toastmasters for a demo meeting, or would it be better for them to be mixing up with the potential members who are interested in the meetings?
Oh, I'm not sure I understand that. I would definitely say that Toastmasters from other clubs should be invited to the meeting if that's what the person meant. And for when you're doing these corporate champion meetings, then it definitely should be a couple Toastmasters. And in case there's a Toastmaster in the company you're approaching, and that's perhaps one of the reasons why you're approaching, they can also give their experience. I give an example of that. So in my role as region advisor, then I visited corporate clubs when I was visiting in District 110. And so some of the local Toastmaster came, and as well, I showed up there. I gave a short presentation, and then we asked, what needs, or what was the club doing to fulfill the needs in the organization? And that's when the members answered. And that gave so much credibility, because they were speaking with authenticity. They were speaking with so much enthusiasm. And, one person speaking said one thing, and then somebody said, oh yeah, and there's this and there's that. And just getting the whole interreaction of the different Toastmaster members there made it really sink in to, we had 3 management levels of the company show up at that particular meeting. And that really produced such a positive effect. So I think Toastmasters attending this demo meeting or the meeting with the corporate champion is a great thing to do.
Okay, we have actually an additional question coming up related to the sustainability of a corporate club. So there are some clubs which basically does not have enough mentors and also support from the club itself So how would you reach out to them? Because they are not reaching out to the area directors and stuff. So how would you face this problem?
So if I understood the question, it's related to having a mentor for each of the members in a corporate club. If I mention a couple of background things I'm thinking about, if it's a really closed corporate club, then of course it might be difficult to get members from other clubs around to also attend and be the mentors. But maybe what we should be proposing is, a couple ideas popped into my head just now, and that is often the companies where we're starting a corporate club already have a corporate club somewhere else in the world. I give an example of AstraZeneca, where I'm located in Sweden. And when we started to research, we found out that there was an AstraZeneca club, actually 3 AstraZeneca clubs in America. And what some of the members did is team up with members in the company in those other places, even though there were currently mentors available in the other clubs in the city. But that's something I'd like to encourage. And maybe it's even possible that just like there's Facebook groups available for finding mentors for community situations, maybe we have to establish a similar kind of thing for corporations, because maybe somebody is in pharmaceuticals and they would like another mentor in the pharmaceutical industry or something. So those are a couple of ideas that popped into my head just now.
I think Paul would like to add on to it.
Just a couple of thoughts to add on to what Elizabeth has already shared around those questions. The one question was around the launch meeting, how you go about doing that. I want to make you aware of a launch model that Elena has used before that can be quite successful both in community and corporate clubs, that can provide you a great framework for how you go about that very important launch meeting, based on the principle that if you can get the guests to speak at that first meeting, then there's a great chance that they will join the club. The other separate question about the health of the club that we were talking about is, well, one should be clear about what the definition of a corporate club is. So in example 1, there's an organization here in Brisbane, 5,000 employees. So one would think that's a perfect space for a corporate club. But the HR function within the business is unaware of the club. So there's no opportunity for you to be able to go along and engage with HR and say, do you know you have this Toastmasters Club, there's only 5 people in the room, you know, what are you going to do about it? Because they don't consider that this club is part of their corporate education program. Another example is an organization is part of the federal government here, and it's clearly part of their corporate development. So you can engage directly with HR from that perspective, which gets back to my final point about the memorandum of understanding that Elizabeth referred to. One element of that is talking about what we provide, training, an area director, leadership training, mentors for the club. But the other part emphasizes what the corporate needs to provide. 20 plus people in every single meeting, a venue, list the Toastmasters program on your internal education, include Toastmasters in your performance evaluations, a quarterly review between the corporate and us, Toastmasters. So when we send our area director in, they get to meet with the HR director inside the organization themselves. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Paul. So currently we have no further questions. Please continue.
Great. Let me go on with the 4th section here. And why aren't my slides moving? There. So also wanted to look at what are some of the next steps. And Paul just touched on a couple of them about laying the foundation for the corporate program, and then a little bit about the demonstration meeting. So when you're going in to meet these corporate champion or corporate sponsor, then you want to indicate what are the conditions or what are the support levels that you expect from it. And first line there, confirm the support that they're willing to put out. Is it time? Is it money? Is it money, time for the employees? Can they conduct the meeting on their work time? Hopefully they can have it as a regular meeting. You know, if they'd have their regular team meeting at 1 o'clock on Tuesdays, why not have the Toastmaster meeting at 1 o'clock on Tuesdays instead of having to take their lunch hour or after work? Then you know you really have the support of the company. The second point, having consistent support throughout the organization by whatever process they choose to use. So that would mean that the marketing department and the finance department and the IT department all would receive the same support that they can attend the Toastmaster meeting. And the support could also be that, you know, all members of the different parts of the organization get the same time off or time allocated to attend the program. Point number 3 is, how will the company itself promote the program or promote people to attend Toastmasters? Some companies have a training catalog. Some companies have an online education list for all their employees. And I just heard of a recent example. I was really pleased to hear about it. Here in Sweden, we have Volvo. And one of the members of one of the clubs, actually one of the board members, was able to get the Toastmasters program listed as an education option. And I think nobody from that club had thought of it before, but this particular person did. So I was really pleased to hear that. I think we who are going in to sell the concept should also be promoting Toastmasters as an employee benefit. And here I'm thinking that the Toastmasters program is paid for by the company, but also here when I say new and current employees, so we should be promoting it for the new employee, what's the word I want? New employee, only Swedish words are coming here. So when new employees are coming on board, there's often a meeting where they're introducing them to the company. That meeting, that's where I think Toastmasters we should be telling about it. And so maybe that means that Toastmaster has to show up on those occasions when new employees are introduced. New employee introduction, maybe that's the word I wanted. And the last point I put there is, how will the company integrate the Toastmaster program into a regular performance review? So that means they're tracking the employee development and learning. So in my employee development plan for the year, I would say that I want to achieve 2 of the levels in the Pathways program, and then I would be tracked on that. I've also heard companies that also track the attendance at the meetings. So those are a couple of ways where the company can see that employees are developing and learning. And I'm going to go to my next slide before I open it up for some additional questions, because I think there's some additional foundation things here. The company should also be discussed how people would be recognized when they achieve a milestone. So if they, you know, achieve a competent communicator in the old program, or a DTM, or any of the different levels in the Pathways program, how could it be recognized? Would it be put on a bulletin board, if such a thing exists, or an online bulletin board? How about an internal website? Or how about mailing it out to people in the company, if that's what that particular company does, to let people know of the achievement? For the person who is responsible in the district, or the person who's gone in and sold in this concept, I think there should also be a check-in time for a status report on the program about what's happening, and probably every 6 months, because leaving it for a year is just a bit too long. And this is also a chance to check on all the other details that I've just talked about. Are people attending meetings? Is there 20 members? Are people achieving different awards? Have the officers, or the new name for them, have they attended the training sessions for them? I attach it to the next one there, where we talk about the status report meetings. So probably the person who's going in to do this is talking about the progress in the program. And if we use the Easy Speak system, then that progress is clearly identifiable. But there should also be accountability from the company side, because they should know whether people are showing up and ways to encourage people to show up. As well, in this status report meeting, there should be whether there's any upcoming changes in the company. Are there going to be layoffs? Are they moving buildings? Things like that. And then share feedback about how it's working. And hopefully out of this, corporate champion or sponsor has been attending some of the meetings. And I think it's up to the Toastmasters in the program to invite them to attend. Maybe they can be on every meeting invitation. And the last point I had here is we want to ensure that if the corporate champion leaves the company or moves to another section, that we think it's important that another one be appointed. They can't just disappear off the radar, because we want to maintain a relationship as a responsible business partner in this situation. So I will stop there for a second and see if there's any more questions. Anything, Aaron?
There's one. In corporations, usually there are occasional bases whereby corporate champions will suddenly retire from the scene, and the club will not be able to reach out to the areas and districts. So when you mentioned about every 6 months to check on it, would that be a feasible option, or should there be a more proactive approach by the districts?
I definitely think it could be more often. If a person like an area director, or I mean, it could even be the president of the club, right? If the president of the club knows this corporate champion, why not check in every month? Because then you'd find out. Usually changes in the company don't happen faster than a month, do they? Because then the person could check in once a month and say, hey, you know, Mary and Sally and Fred have achieved this level, and we're having a next training coming up, and hey, we're having a special session about how to give good feedback. So if that continuous flow happens with the champion, then it's going to be a lot better, and you're going to find out if he's leaving. And if he or she is leaving, then ask them for the next one. Otherwise, it should be somebody in HR that identifies who's the responsible person for matching up with Toastmasters.
Okay, currently there's no further questions. Please continue.
Thanks so much. So then the next part I had is preparing for the demonstration meeting, and you might call it info meeting. I'm a bit actually allergic to the term demonstration meeting. I think information meeting is a little bit better, but I'll use it now in the discussion. In that meeting with the corporate champion, you have agreed upon a date for this information meeting. And as you want the corporate champion to attend, then please be sure that he checks it in his calendar that he can attend. Somebody within the corporation, maybe this corporate champion again, should be booking a meeting room. And then if you find out that there's more people attending, then you want to get to a bigger room, or less people attending, you might want to downsize it so you don't have a room for 100 people and maybe only 20 show up. As well, you'll need help with the person to invite people within the company. How are you going to promote it? Who's going to send out this invitation? And I think in most corporations, they're using a tool similar to Outlook, so that a meeting booking should go out so the people have it in their calendar. And that's like giving the permission that people can attend it as well. Of course, you want to get as many people as possible showing up and involved during the meeting. Paul mentioned this a little bit earlier in the launch model, and this is often done by having a table topic question that is something really positive. So in the particular launch model, what they've done is hand out a piece of paper as people are coming into the meeting where they put their name on, and then they answer the question, something along the line of, what's a moment that you are most proud of? And they are just to write a sentence or two on their paper. And then the table topics master will say, oh, there's a person in the room who says their most proud moment was that. Would you like to come forward and talk about it? Or some similar question that would get people involved, and then do lots of table topics questions during the meeting. Also think you should have a simple program, but make it memorable. When a couple people are giving speeches, often a beginning Toastmaster is a good idea, because if you only put your advanced Toastmasters out giving speeches, then some people will think, oh, I could never talk like that. I could never be that good. So you do want somebody who's at a, fairly beginning level, so people can see the potential for themselves. You want to have all the roles set before the meeting. Here's the bit at the bottom here, hand out the card with the engaging question and use that for the table topic session. As well, have all the roles set so you know who will take the role, and have a backup plan. Have a couple of extra people, so if somebody gets sick or can't attend, you have somebody else who can take over a role. I've included a couple more things about the demo. So at the start of the demo meeting, somebody should explain what's happening during the meeting, what each role does. Here I said there could be a couple speeches, a beginner and a more advanced. And by advanced, I could mean speech number 5, It doesn't have to be somebody who's doing advanced projects. Table topics could be the question on the card. I think the evaluation session is really important. So it should be somebody who does a good evaluation and an encouraging evaluation. And be sure to explain other special roles like awe counter and timer, and why we're doing them, because those are things that are special for Toastmasters, and people need to know the reason why we're doing that. At the end of the meeting, you should also have some announcements. You should have decided a date so you can invite the people to attend the next meeting. So our next meeting is in 2 weeks' time on Thursday the 2nd. You also want to ask for people who are interested in leadership roles. And I actually got a bit surprised in one of the corporate clubs I was starting, where we did say, well, we need people who are interested in taking a leadership role, and people volunteered. It blew my mind. So I really suggest that. And also ask for people who are interested to participate in the next meeting. What role could they take? Could they lead the table topics? Would they like to get started on their icebreaker? And as well, we also hand out the icebreaker project so that people can get started thinking about it. Hand out or send out according to the email list that they've signed up upon. I'll do one more slide, and that is follow up. We should do follow up after the demo or info meeting. Send out a thank you to all who attended, or those who couldn't make it but had planned to attend. And this has a prerequisite, right? You have to know an email address or a telephone number or a messenger number that you can send out something to them. Also invite them to the next meeting dates, and I put more than one there. So plan more than one in succession. Send out the icebreaker speech electronically so they have it. And also send out information about the leadership roles, and I speak of 2 levels of leadership here. I'm speaking of the leaders in the meeting, like what does a Toastmaster do, or a general evaluator or so on, but also what are the leadership roles such as president or vice president, education, and so on. So people will also volunteer for those things as well. And now I will pause for a second before my closing slides to see if there's any more questions.
The only question that I have received so far that's common among 4 to 5 participants is that will this slide be available after this recording?
Yes, absolutely. And the recording will be available. And in my follow-up slide coming shortly, I'm suggesting that we need to massage these slides a bit. So these slides were for you who are interested in possibly starting it. But if we massage them a bit, I think you can take them out and show them to the corporates, especially, you know, the things like the benefits to the corporation. Yeah, and so I'm willing to also massage these so people can take them forward. So maybe there'll be this set of slides for us internally, and then the set of slides for when you go to the company.
Okay, so no further questions. Please continue your closing.
Thank you. So, of course, there has to be a call to action in a speech. And for those of you who are interested in corporate partnerships in some way, corporate programs, then we have a Facebook discussion group called Toastmasters Corporate Partnerships. So Paul started that, and I said, yes, this is a great idea. Let's share on Facebook. So please, I think it's request permission to join. And please sign up there because we're starting to share some good ideas. Maybe this presentation will also be there. Also, another call to action based on what you heard during the cold call process. Is there a company or corporation that you could contact and try this out? Could it even be the company that you work for if there's not a Toastmaster Club there yet? Something to think about, point number 3 is what companies are currently sitting in the Insightly CRM system for your district. Has your club growth director gone out and said, yes, we've had a company who wanted to start a club in Hamburg, you know, who in Hamburg could follow up on this? So those sometimes get lost a bit when companies are in there, and we've got to keep track of that. We've got to have the follow-up happening on those. And what I said just on the last slide is we should expand this training so that our district leaders, and district leaders is at any level in the district, could even mean club leader, about the corporate language and about building clubs. It was suggested in our region advisor group that there should be something called a corporate relations officer in each district to keep in touch with the corporate champions at the corporate clubs. As well, this person could be somebody who's in touch with the companies when they seem to have difficulty paying the fees, getting an invoice or something like that. So I really recommend the corporate relations officer in a district. I'll stop there as I think I see some blinking lights. Maybe there's some more questions.
Nope, it's actually my typo error. Continue.
Okay, great. Then I did want to put one last thing in, and something about our sources. So I mentioned at the start, there's Pat Johnson's book called A Handbook for Building and Sustaining Vibrant Toastmaster Programs in Corporations. And what I've shared with you today is a lot of the ideas out of that, but also my own experience. I've actually started 4 corporate clubs in Sweden, and during my term as district governor, I also visited other clubs who were in the process of getting started. And I'm pleased to say a lot of those are still in existence, so something must have been done right. As well, I'm sharing from other region advisor experiences, and our region advisors in the meeting we had yesterday expressed a lot of interest as well in corporate programs and getting them going. And as well, where the interest also was if there's a PricewaterhouseCoopers company in one part of the world, and you have a PricewaterhouseCoopers company near you and there's no Toastmaster Club, let's have some sharing there so we can get more corporate clubs going. As well, Paul indicated that he's also built and supported corporate clubs in his home district at the time, which was District 74, Southern Africa. He's also worked with Mauritius, which is an undistricted area, and got some different cultural differences from there. And now he's doing the corporate club work in Australia. And this is the end of my presentation, and I'm opening it up for more questions or comments or ideas. Is it possible that we can have people speak up and mention things themselves?
Yeah, it's possible. So would you like us to spotlight them?
Or I think we could just open it and just say your name and come on and ask the question or comment.
Okay.
Of course, it could.
Hello, this is Peter. Can I take off?
Yes.
Yeah. Hello, and in my point of view, good evening. It's 2200 hours here in Helsinki, Finland. Well, I can't say that this presentation couldn't have come in more apt, because you see, I work for the city of Helsinki. That's by far the biggest employer we have in all Finland, and I've been working for this organization for several years, and not many days ago, I finally found out the right person who to speak to, starting a corporate club, and then come this. Yeah, this is brilliant. I have no specific question at this moment. I just wanted to express how happy I am to see this. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to hear. And I'd like to hear this from all over our districts. And by the way, our question master, Aaron, it's such a treat that he joined us, because he's calling in from Hong Kong at 3 in the morning. So, thank you for helping us, Aaron.
You're welcome. It's really helpful because I'm in charge of a corporate club as a club mentor, and I'm thinking about all different solutions to sustain it. And this turns out to be very helpful in revitalizing how the club works in the upcoming 6 months for me.
Oh, great. Anything else that we can answer for anybody?
Yes, my name is Elizabeth, and I'm the division director in Division C here in Berlin. I have today been at the corporate club meeting as the mentor for a new club starting, corporate club starting. There were over 40 people in the room. It seems to me that now everyone is doing their icebreakers, and their icebreakers. So they get to see a lot of icebreakers, but how do we support them in moving along? We've given them a handbook, of course, according to the old system, but with still no access to pathways at this stage. And I have the same problem with several of my prospective clubs. How do we keep them engaged, or this is the next step, or this is what you can learn if you continue focusing on this? It seems that is a bit of a challenge. Not only with corporate, but also with prospective clubs. And a second question is, we have a new person who actually just called me yesterday. I had a long chat with her from a large company in Hanover, where we already have a corporate club, which is very closed. We don't know very much about this other club, and it seems to be not doing so well. How can we support a big new club with 5,000 employees? I think when the people in the actual town, the Toastmasters there, are already really flat out themselves to keep the prospective clubs, their own clubs and their own areas managing, to also have resources to put into a new corporate club, because it does need resources. And I'm not always sure that I'm not overloading my area directors with stuff. And of course, I have an assistant. I think she's even on the call here from America, Kushi. And she does an amazing set of work, but still everyone's running flat out. I'm a bit concerned that we're using people's voluntary work here to really put them into situations where I don't want to complain or sound as if it's overloading, but how can we deal with this? I would just like to have some back up to how do we put like people who are already working hard in my areas to encourage them to also go and start up a new corporate club or sponsor it or help them in the sponsoring or the mentorship of it so that it can roll.
So let me go to your first question, or I think it was a question anyway. How do we keep them interested? How do we supply more materials? And it's not something that I have actual experience in, but what I have heard. And that is that the people from other clubs who have gone farther in pathways are printing out the material. And it's a similar thing to the educational session that used to exist for you know, helping people, what was the next speech coming and what were the roles in the club and all that. Then I think it's time for us to show some of the pathways progress and what they can do next in pathways. So the people, and weren't you even one of the pathways guides or ambassadors? So take some of the material that came with pathways guides and ambassadors to show them what's also coming along. So that's to keep them interested, I think. But to answer the part, I think people who are in the advanced sections need to print out the material so that it's not just icebreakers that's happening, so that people can proceed to level number 2. And maybe that's an unpolitical answer. And as this is recorded, I probably have to shield myself from other angry people. But I also know that it has been addressed within it has been asked within the Pathways program. When we held a session at the Chicago Convention, then people were asking this question. So I think some answers are going to be coming along about that part.
Great, thank you.
So we have Paul to add in some comments. I think Paul raised up his hand.
Okay.
I think we work in a very interesting environment given the fact that we're working primarily with volunteers. And so one has to be mindful of their resource, interest, availability. As leaders, our role is to set the stage, not perform on it. And so that was one of the things that I learned from my mentors, and how I apply that from a Toastmasters point of view is your role is to inspire others, and you inspire them by the stories you tell. So I've had the privilege of working on 3 continents over 20 years, engaging with lots of different corporates and building businesses in those spaces. So now I'm talking about my business experience. That's primarily been driven and enhanced and built through what I've learned in Toastmasters. The opportunity I've had in terms of engaging with corporates and understanding how to position, market, sell the various services, I've learned that in Toastmasters. And so when you tell stories like that, some people in the room will listen and say, ooh, I'd like a piece of that. I'd like to learn how to do that. And so when you tell those stories, you have an opportunity to gather the teams necessary to support the ongoing growth of clubs in our areas and our divisions. And when you ask, someone will put their hand up, because someone's at a stage in their life where they're ready to develop those particular skills, and they are inspired by the stories that you tell.
So I add on to that, definitely inspiration and definitely getting engagement from our some Toastmasters who aren't usually so active. What occurs to me is there's always some Toastmasters who are moving along in the leadership side and who need or want the credit for starting a new club. And at least for those of us in Europe who are using EasySpeak, that's very easy to see those people because we see it in the EasySpeak system. How close are they where they soon need to start a club? And maybe they don't even realize that. And then those are the people we need to address particularly and ask if they could help in starting a corporate club. That was the example that way. But what I add on here is, I mean, I'm thinking of myself working for a large company where we have a lot of online programs. And I think that's where we learn a lot nowadays. In fact, it's very seldom that we get to attend a course because we're following the course in an online system. So we're pointing this out to the corporates that is the availability. But the other connection I wanted to make is, you said, do we have enough resources to get it started? And I can remember when we were starting the Toastmaster Club here in Sweden, quite a few years back. We had me, who had been a member for a year and a half or so at a club, but hadn't been a leader of the club. And we did have one other person who had been a member for maybe 3 or 4 years at another place. And between the two of us, we were the people who were leading the club to get started. Did we do everything right? Probably not. But at that time, we weren't even a district in Europe, but we were getting support from other people who had Toastmaster clubs going for a longer time. So for this Hanover group, I would say, reach out to other people, reach out on things like our Facebook groups and say, hey, is there anybody who's willing to help in some way to support the group? Because, for instance, I could certainly attend an online meeting and say, well, here's how we did it in the corporate club that I belong to, or speak to the management at this Hanover place you mentioned and go through these sources with them. That's something that I love to do. So I'll shut up and I'll ask if that answered your questions, Elizabeth, or comments.
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you very much, Paul and Elizabeth. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Is there anybody else who'd like to share, or perhaps we're getting close to our wrap-up time and
Hi, Elizabeth.
Oh, hi, Mark. Are you online too? Wow.
I definitely am. So it's just gone 6 a.m. here in Australia, but glad to be a part of it. So I guess just wanted to share an experience from building corporate clubs in this part of the world. So we started up a couple of clubs post the Pathways rollout, and so they've only ever known Pathways. What we found really useful was having, I guess, a bit of a roadmap for the new club in terms of, okay, so we've just had our demonstration meeting. How can we bring our members up to speed very, very quickly on what they need to know? And so for each of our probably the first dozen meetings, in addition to the icebreakers that were being scheduled, we were also running a very deliberate set of educationals around different meeting roles, around evaluation, around overcoming nerves. And then the approach we took was the mentors would take on a meeting role, they would explain how they were doing it as they were doing it, and then the next meeting, they would basically be handed over to the club. And so we'd gradually do that with each of the roles, ramping up in complexity. So we'd start with timer. Whoever the Toastmaster mentor was doing timer would explain the role for that meeting, and then the next meeting, one of the new members would take it over, and then it would be new members taking it over for the rest of the time after that, and so on and so forth up until Toastmaster. And we found that worked quite well to bring people up to speed so that they could run their own club as soon as possible without, I guess, the mentors having to carry the club for a long period of time.
Sounds great, Mark. And what I'm guessing is that you actually have a picture of this roadmap.
We may possibly be working on that now with Paul.
Yeah, otherwise, I got this picture in my head just based on what you said. So maybe we can also collaborate and get something going there.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. I love the idea. Roadmap is a term we use in corporates. So let's add it. Here's the roadmap for how Toastmasters should be setting up a club.
Hi, Elizabeth. This is your friend, Roz, RA, Region 2. I just want to thank you for an outstanding webinar. And I'm excited to be able to share this recording with my district leaders when it's available. Thank you again. You and Paul.
Thanks for attending, Roz. Really pleased that you came along.
Paul would like to add something, I think.
No, I'm all good. Thanks.
Okay.
Good. Then let's not overdo the time. Elena has my email address, or actually I could have written it in here. Darn, why didn't I do that? So I'm available by email, on Messenger, or at this page that we mentioned, which was the Facebook page. And now my screen's not moving. If you wrote it down, the Toastmasters Corporate Partnerships Facebook page, I'm there. So feel free to contact Paul and I there and ask any additional questions or leave comments for us. So thanks very much for tonight, and look forward to speaking to you in another webinar. Who knows when, who knows where.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Paul. Thank you very much for this informative and interactive webinar, and thanks a lot for Aaron for managing questions. And we had, this is one of the most international webinars we had in District 108. Thank you very much for all our attendees. We had attendees from European districts 59, 95, 107, 108, and special thanks for joining us from China, from Australia. So thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you at our next webinars. We are planning next webinars in District 108 on PR tools and on moments of truth. So, and this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.